The boy's crutches echoed across the marble floor of the Lagos High Court. One step, clack. Another step, clack. The sound cut through the murmur of lawyers, the rustling of files, the hum of the overhead fan that barely worked. His name was Emeka Obi. He was 15 years old. His left leg ended just below the knee, taken by an infection when he was 7 because his family couldn't afford the hospital in time. The crutch under his arm was made of wood his grandmother had sanded smooth with her own hands. The other was aluminum, donated by a church in Surulere 3 years ago. They didn't match. Nothing about Emeka matched anything in this building. The Lagos High Court in Ibo Sere was built for men in silk agbadas and Italian shoes. For senior advocates with briefcases that cost more than a year's rent in Ajegunle. For money, for power, for people who belonged. Emeka did not belong. Everyone in the courtroom could see it. Justice Babatunde Akinola leaned forward on the bench and adjusted his glasses. He had served on this court for 27 years. He'd seen everything. Armed robbers who wept for mercy. Politicians who lied so smoothly it sounded like poetry. He'd never seen a boy on crutches walk into his courtroom carrying a second-hand school bag as a briefcase. "Clerk," Justice Akinola said, his voice low and sharp. "What is this?" The clerk checked his docket. "My lord, this is case number LD/5847/2025. Obi versus Grandstone Properties Limited. The respondent is the minor, representing himself and his grandmother, Mrs. Adeze Obi." Akinola stared at Emeka over his glasses. Then he did something that every person in that room would remember for the rest of their lives. He laughed. Not quietly, a full laugh, his shoulders shaking, his hands slapping the bench. Two lawyers at the front exchanged glances. A court clerk covered her mouth. The gallery, half empty on a Tuesday morning, stirred. "Is this a joke?" Akinola said, still smiling. "Who sent you? A boy on crutches? To argue a property case? In my court?" Emeka stood still. He did not smile. He did not look down. He adjusted the school bag on his shoulder and spoke. "My lord, my name is Emeka Obi. I am here to defend my grandmother's land at 14 Adeniyi Jones Street, Ikeja. The petitioner, Grandstone Properties, is trying to take it using a forged certificate of occupancy. I have evidence." The courtroom went quiet. Akinola's smile faded by exactly 1 degree. "Son," he said, "do you even know what a certificate of occupancy is?" "Yes, my lord. It's a document issued under the Land Use Act of 1978, Section 5, Subsection 1A, which grants the holder rights of occupancy over a parcel of land administered by the state governor. My grandmother's C of O was issued in 1983 by the Lagos state government. Grandstone's was issued in 2024 for the same parcel. Both cannot be valid. One of them is forged. I intend to prove which one." Silence. Absolute silence. The fan overhead creaked. Somewhere outside, a car horn blared on Broad Street. Inside the courtroom, nobody moved. Justice Akinola removed his glasses, cleaned them slowly, put them back on, and looked at Emeka Obi with an expression that was no longer amusement. It was the first flicker of something else entirely. To understand why a 15-year-old boy on crutches was standing in the Lagos High Court that morning, you have to understand what 14 Adeniyi Jones Street meant to the Obi family. The land had been in the family since 1971. Emeka's grandfather, Chief Nnamdi Obi, had purchased it when Ikeja was still mostly farmland and red earth roads. He was a civil servant, nothing glamorous, but he saved every kobo for 12 years to buy that half-acre plot. He built a modest house on it with his own hands, cinder blocks, zinc roof, a veranda where he would sit every evening drinking palm wine and listening to the radio. When Chief Obi died in 2001, the house passed to his wife, Adeze. She raised 3 children in that house. She buried one of them, Emeka's mother, from that house, after a brief illness when Emeka was 4. After that, it was just Adeze and Emeka, grandmother and grandson. The house and the land were everything they had, not just property, identity, history, proof that they existed. Then Grandstone Properties arrived. Grandstone was one of the new breed of Lagos developers, the kind that built glass towers and gated estates for the wealthy, funded by investors from London and Dubai, run by men who had never set foot in the neighborhoods they demolished. The CEO was a man named Chief Raymond Adekunle. In Lagos real estate circles, people called him the bulldozer, not because of his construction equipment, but because of what happened to anyone who stood in his way. Grandstone had been buying up properties along Adenyi Jones Avenue for a massive mixed-use development, luxury apartments, a shopping mall, a private hospital. The project was worth 18 billion naira. Adeze's half-acre plot sat right at the center of it. Grandstone offered her 12 million naira. The land was worth at least 90 million at current Ikeja prices. When she refused, the pressure began. First came the visits. Men in dark SUVs parking outside her gate at odd hours. Never threatening directly, just present, watching. Then came the paperwork. A letter from the Lagos State Land Bureau claiming her certificate of occupancy had irregularities and needed to be reviewed. A second letter reclassifying her land as commercial, tripling her annual land use charge overnight. Then came the construction. Grandstone began building on the adjacent plots, and their equipment accidentally damaged Adeze's fence wall 3 times. Each time, the repair cost more than her monthly pension. And finally came the lawsuit. Grandstone Properties filed for a court order, claiming they held a valid certificate of occupancy for the land at 14 Adenyi Jones Street, issued by the Lagos state government in 2024. They argued that Adeze's 1983 document was obsolete and had been superseded by the new allocation. In other words, they had manufactured a fake government document, and they were using the legal system to make the theft look legitimate. Adeze went to 4 lawyers. The first 3 quoted fees she couldn't dream of affording: 2 million, 3 million, 5 million naira. The fourth, a young lawyer from a legal aid clinic, agreed to take the case for free. He showed up to the first hearing, argued competently, and 2 days later called Adeze to say he could no longer represent her. He didn't explain why. His voice was shaking when he hung up. Nobody would say it openly, but everyone in the neighborhood knew. You didn't fight Chief Raymond Adekunle, not if you wanted to keep practicing law in Lagos. That's when Emeka made his decision. The boy had been quiet for most of his life. After losing his leg at 7, he'd learned to be invisible, to take up less space, to ask for less, to need less. He sat in the back of his classroom at community secondary school in Ajegunle, said nothing unless spoken to, and came home every afternoon to help his grandmother cook. But at night, he read. It started after the first Grandstone letter arrived, and he saw his grandmother cry for the first time in his life. She was sitting at the kitchen table, the letter in her hands, her reading glasses crooked, tears running silently down her face. She didn't make a sound. That was worse. Emeka went to the school library the next day and asked for books on Nigerian land law. The librarian, Mr. Olawale, looked at him like he'd asked for a spaceship. But he found 2 dusty volumes in the back room, a 1992 edition of Nigerian Land Law and Practice, and a photocopied handbook on the Land Use Act. Within a month, Emeka had read both cover to cover. Twice. He started visiting the Lagos State Law Library on Sapara Williams Close during school holidays. The security guard tried to turn him away the first time, a boy on crutches with no ID badge. But a librarian named Mrs. Funke Adeyemi saw him standing at the gate, a notebook in his hand and determination on his face that she recognized. She'd seen that look before, on the faces of young lawyers who would one day become judges. She let him in. Over the next 18 months, Emeka read everything: the Land Use Act of 1978, the Evidence Act of 2011, the Lagos State High Court Civil Procedure Rules. He read case law, Ajuwan versus Adioti, Ogunliye versus Oni, Savannah Bank versus Agilo, writing down the holdings in his composition notebooks, cross-referencing them, building arguments. Mrs. Adeyemi would find him still reading when she was locking up at 4 p.m. She started leaving him snacks, Chin and a bottle of Fanta. She never said much. She didn't need to. She could see what was happening. A boy who the world had decided was broken was building himself into a weapon. And now he was standing in Justice Akinola's courtroom, with a school bag full of evidence, and the attention of every person in the room. On the other side of the courtroom, Grandstone Properties had sent their full legal arsenal. Chief Barrister Adebayo Fashola, S.A.N., Senior Advocate of Nigeria, one of the most decorated litigators in the country. Behind him sat 2 junior associates and a paralegal, all with matching leather briefcases. The table in front of them was stacked with bound documents, exhibits, and 3 laptop computers. Fashola looked at Emeka the way a lion looks at something too small to bother eating. "My lord," Fashola said, rising with the practiced gravity of a man accustomed to winning. The petitioner respectfully submits that this matter is straightforward. Grandstone Properties holds a valid certificate of occupancy issued by the Lagos state government. The respondent's claim rests on an outdated document from 1983 that has been superseded by current allocations. We request the court enter an order for possession. He placed a bound document on the bench. Our certificate of occupancy, my lord, stamped, signed, and registered. Justice Akinola examined it. It looked legitimate. Government letterhead, official stamps, the signature of the Commissioner for Lands. "Mr. Obi," the judge said, turning to Emeka, "you've heard the petitioner's submission. What is your response?" Emeka balanced on his crutches, opened his school bag, and pulled out a clear plastic folder. Inside were documents, each one labeled with a handwritten tab. "My lord, I have 3 submissions." "3?" Akinola raised an eyebrow. "Yes, my lord. The first concerns the authenticity of Grandstone's certificate of occupancy. The second concerns a pattern of forged documents connected to the same signatory. And the third concerns what happened to the last lawyer who tried to defend my grandmother." The courtroom stirred. Fashola's expression shifted. Not much, just enough. "Proceed with your first submission," Akinola said. Emeka placed a single sheet of paper on the bench. "My lord, Grandstone's certificate of occupancy bears the signature of one Mr. Kehinde Dosunmu, identified as Commissioner for Lands, Lagos State. It is dated March 15, 2024. He paused. "Mr. Kehinde Dosunmu resigned as Commissioner for Lands on January 8, 2024. He was replaced by Mrs. Adebimpe Coker on January 22, 2024. This is the official Lagos State Government Gazette confirming the change." He placed the Gazette on the bench. The man who signed Grandstone's certificate of occupancy was not the Commissioner for Lands on the date the document was issued. He had no authority to sign it. The signature is either forged or Mr. Dosunmu signed a government document 2 months after he left office. Either way, the C of O is invalid. The courtroom held its breath. Fashola stood. "My lord, this is. The respondent is a child. He is not qualified to." "Sit down, Chief Fashola," Akinola said. His voice had changed. The amusement from 20 minutes ago was gone. Something sharper had replaced it. "I want to hear the boy's second submission." Emeka pulled out 5 more documents. "My lord, I visited the Lagos State Land Registry on 3 separate occasions. I requested public records for all certificates of occupancy issued to Grandstone Properties Limited in the last 5 years. Under the Freedom of Information Act 2011, Section 1, these records are available to any Nigerian citizen." He laid the documents out one by one. Grandstone Properties has obtained certificates of occupancy for 7 other properties in the Ikeja area since 2021. I compared the signatures on all of them. He held up 2 documents side by side. 3 of these certificates also bear the signature of Mr. Kehinde Dosunmu, but 2 of those were dated after his resignation. The signature on all 3 is identical. Not similar, my lord. Identical. The same pen pressure, the same angle, the same spacing. It's the same signature photocopied or stamped onto different documents. Murmurs spread through the gallery. More people had filtered in. A court clerk had apparently told another court clerk. Word was traveling through the building. Fashola was on his feet again. "My lord, I must object. This child is making serious allegations of fraud against a reputable Chief Fashola." Akinola's voice was ice. "I said sit down. I will not ask again." Fashola sat. "Your third submission, Mr. Obi." Emeka paused. For the first time, his voice dropped slightly. Not from weakness, from weight. "My lord, my grandmother's first lawyer was Mr. Tunde Bakare from the Public Interest Law Center. He agreed to take our case pro bono. He filed our initial response. He attended the first hearing in this court. 2 days later, he withdrew from the case without explanation." Emeka reached into his bag and pulled out a phone, an old Nokia, the kind with buttons. The evening before Mr. Bakari withdrew, he received a phone call at 11:47 p.m. He was so disturbed by the call that he phoned my grandmother immediately afterwards at 12:03 a.m. He told her, and I was in the room, "My lord, I heard this with my own ears, that he had been told his law practice would be finished if he continued representing us." He said the caller referenced his daughter's school by name. The courtroom went so quiet you could hear the traffic on Broad Street 3 floors below. "I cannot prove who made that call, my lord. I am not making that accusation. But I am asking this court to note that a licensed lawyer was threatened into abandoning a grandmother's defense, and that the only party who benefited from his withdrawal was the petitioner sitting in this room." He looked directly at Fashola's table, not with anger, with something worse. Calm. "My lord, I am 15 years old. I am standing in this court on one leg because no lawyer in Lagos would stand here on two. Not because they didn't believe in our case, because they were afraid. I am not afraid. I have nothing they can take from me that they haven't already tried to take." Dorothy, no, Adaeze Obi, 73 years old, sitting in the second row in her best wrapper and head tie, the one she wore to church on Easter Sunday. She pressed both hands against her chest. Her lips were moving, but no sound came out. The woman beside her, a stranger who had come to watch a different case, put an arm around her shoulder. Justice Akinola stared at the boy for a very long time. Then he turned to Fashola. "Chief Fashola, your client's certificate of occupancy bears the signature of a man who was not in office on the date it was issued. The same signature appears on multiple other certificates, at least 2 of which were also dated after the signatory's departure. And the respondent's previous legal counsel appears to have been intimidated into withdrawing." He paused. "Do you have anything to say?" Fashola stood slowly. For the first time in his career, the senior advocate of Nigeria had nothing prepared. His junior associates were staring at their laptops. One of them was furiously texting someone. "My lord, I would request an adjournment to verify the..." Denied. Justice Akinola picked up his pen. The courtroom was now standing room only. Lawyers from other courts had come in. 3 journalists sat in the back row, one of them already typing on her phone. A security guard who was supposed to be watching the door had given up and was watching Emeka instead. In the matter of Grandstone Properties Limited versus Mrs. Adaeze Obi, case number LD/5847/2025. Akinola's voice carried the weight of every word. This court finds that the petitioner's certificate of occupancy, dated March 15, 2024, is fraudulent. The document bears the signature of a public official who had vacated office 2 months prior to the date of issuance. The same forged signature appears on multiple other certificates submitted by the same petitioner, suggesting a systematic pattern of document fraud. He looked up. The petition is dismissed with prejudice. Mrs. Obi's certificate of occupancy, issued in 1983, remains valid and enforceable. The land at 14 Adeniyi Jones Street, Ikeja, belongs to her. It has always belonged to her. Adaeze's hand flew to her mouth. A sound escaped, not a cry, not a word, something older than language. But Akinola was not finished. Furthermore, this court is referring the evidence presented today to the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission for investigation into the following matters: the creation and use of forged government documents by Grandstone Properties Limited, the potential complicity of officials within the Lagos State Land Bureau in issuing fraudulent certificates of occupancy, and the reported intimidation of legal counsel retained by the respondent. He turned to Fashola. Chief Fashola, I will be filing a separate report with the body of benchers regarding your firm's role in presenting documents to this court that a basic verification check would have revealed to be fraudulent. A senior advocate of Nigeria should know better. Or perhaps you did know. That will be for the disciplinary committee to determine. Fashola's face was the color of stone. His junior associates had stopped typing. One of them had quietly closed his laptop and was staring at the table. Then Justice Akinola did something that nobody expected. He stood up. In 27 years on the bench, Justice Babatunde Akinola had never stood during a ruling. A judge sits. The courtroom stands for the judge, not the other way around. It is protocol. It is tradition. It is how power works in a Nigerian courtroom. Akinola stood anyway. Mr. Obi. Emeka looked up at him. When you walked into my courtroom this morning, I laughed at you. I looked at your crutches, your school bag, your age, and I decided you were not serious. I decided you did not belong here. The judge's voice was thick. The man who had terrified lawyers for nearly 3 decades was struggling to keep his composure. I was wrong. And I am not a man who says that often. He paused. You did something today that no lawyer in this city was willing to do. Not because they lacked the skill, because they lacked the courage. You walked into this building on crutches, carrying evidence in a school bag, and you presented a more thorough, more devastating, and more courageous legal argument than I have heard from any senior advocate in 27 years on this bench. A woman in the gallery was crying openly. A lawyer in the front row was blinking rapidly and looking at the ceiling. The journalist in the back row had stopped typing because her hands were shaking. This court does not have the power to award what you actually deserve, Mr. Obi. But I can say this, and I am saying it for the record. If there is any justice left in this system, this young man will one day sit where I am sitting. And when he does, God help anyone who tries to take what belongs to the people he loves. Akinola sat down. He picked up his gavel, struck it once. Court is adjourned. The gallery erupted, not with applause, with something more African, more primal. With shouts of and God is good, and the sound of a dozen women clapping in that rhythm that means something has happened that the ancestors should hear about. But Emeka didn't hear any of it. He had already turned around on his crutches and was making his way to the second row, where his grandmother was standing with both arms open. Adaeze grabbed him. She held him so tight his crutches clattered to the floor. She was shaking. He was shaking. She pressed her face into the top of his head and said something in Igbo, so quietly that only he could hear it. Obula M. Na M. Idek. My child, my father, you are strong. Emeka closed his eyes. His 15-year-old body, the one the world had decided was broken, was being held together by the only person who had never believed that. For one moment, in the marble halls of the Lagos High Court, nothing else existed. The journalist's article went live on Punch newspaper's website that evening. By morning, it had been shared 400,000 times. Boy on crutches defeats billion-naira developer in Lagos court was the headline. Within 48 hours, it was on CNN Africa, BBC Pidgin, and Al Jazeera. Grandstone Properties released a statement calling the ruling a procedural misunderstanding. Nobody believed them. The EFCC raided their Ikoyi office the following week. They found 73 land documents with irregularities. Chief Raymond Adekunle, the bulldozer, was arrested at Murtala Muhammad Airport, attempting to board a flight to Dubai. His passport was seized. Chief Barrister Fashola, SAN, was suspended pending investigation by the Legal Practitioners Disciplinary Committee. His firm, which had operated for 31 years, lost 14 clients in a single week. The Lagos State Land Bureau launched an internal audit. 3 officials were suspended. The Commissioner for Lands held a press conference promising comprehensive reform. Whether that promise would be kept was another story. But for the first time, someone was watching. Tunde Bakare, the lawyer who had been threatened into withdrawing, called Adeze the day after the ruling. He was crying. He said he was sorry. He said he had been afraid. Adeze told him what her grandson had told her the night before the hearing. The only thing worse than being afraid is letting fear decide who you are. Mrs. Funke Adeyemi, the librarian at the Lagos State Law Library, who had let a boy on crutches through the gate, read the news on her phone during her lunch break. She smiled, finished her rice, and went back to shelving books. That evening, she put a small handwritten sign on the front desk of the library. It read, "Every book in this building is a weapon. Handle with courage." Marcus, no, not Marcus, this isn't America, this is Lagos. Emeka Obi was offered provisional admission to the University of Lagos Faculty of Law, contingent on completing his WAEC examinations. The dean of the faculty, Professor Chidinma Eze, wrote him a personal letter. It said, "We don't usually write to applicants, but you've already passed the only exam that matters. You showed up when it was hard." Emeka hasn't decided yet. He says he's thinking about it. His grandmother says he should go. He says he will, after he finishes one more thing. There are 4 other families on Adeniyi Jones Street who receive suspicious land documents from Grandstone Properties. None of them can afford lawyers. Emeka has already started reading their files. The house at 14 Adeniyi Jones Street is still standing. It's still modest. The zinc roof still leaks in heavy rain. The veranda still has the chair where Chief Nnamdi Obi used to sit with his palm wine. And the magnolia tree. No, it's not a magnolia. This is Lagos. It's a frangipani tree. White flowers. Sweet, heavy fragrance that fills the whole street in the evening. Chief Obi planted it in 1973, the year he bought the land. 52 years later, it's still there, still blooming. And if you walk past the house on a weeknight, you'll see the light on in the parlor. That's Emeka. Still reading. Still on his crutches, still carrying a school bag that, in the right hands, turned out to be more powerful than 18 billion naira and the most expensive lawyers in the country. Some people hear a boy on crutches and think limitation. Emeka Obi heard a boy on crutches and thought, good, they won't see me coming. If this story touched you, do not scroll past. Like this video. Subscribe to this channel. Share it with someone who is fighting a battle the world told them they couldn't win. Comment below. Where in the world are you watching from? And have you ever been underestimated because of something people could see on the outside? Because the truth is, courage doesn't need 2 legs. It doesn't need a law degree. It doesn't need money or connections or a silk agbada. It just needs one person who refuses to sit down when the world tells them they don't have a leg to stand on.